The German infantryman lay motionless in the shallow ditch, his breast shallow, his eyes fixed on the tree line 200 meters away. Frost clung to his eyelashes. His fingers had gone numb hours ago. He did not know how long he had been lying there. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt endless. Then it happened. No warning. No sound he could recognize. Just impact. By the time the rifle's crack reached the air around him, his body was already collapsing into the frozen soil. His helmet rolled to one side. Steam rose once from his mouth. Then nothing. Somewhere beyond the trees, someone watched through a scope and did not move. This was not artillery. This was not a charge. This was a different kind of war. October 1941, west of Moscow. Germany had launched the largest land invasion in human history. Operation Barbarossa was meant to end the war in months. 4 million soldiers crossed into Soviet territory supported by thousands of tanks, aircraft, and artillery pieces. The German army was built for speed, momentum, and shock. It had crushed Poland. It had shattered France. It had humiliated opponents who could not react fast enough. But the Eastern Front did not behave like the West. Here, speed died. Rain came first. Endless rain. Roads dissolved into mud, so thick it swallowed vehicles whole. Horses collapsed. Trucks burned fuel without moving. Supply convoys stretched thin across vast distances. Then the temperature dropped. Winter arrived early and without mercy. Engines failed. Oil froze. Weapons jammed. Soldiers wrapped rags around their boots and hands. When the front stalled, the war transformed. Movement stopped. Lines hardened. Positions froze in place. Villages became strong points. Forests became borders. Fields turned into exposed killing grounds where crossing even a few meters meant death. And in that stillness, a new kind of killer rose to prominence. The sniper. The Eastern Front was uniquely suited for this kind of warfare. Unlike Western Europe, there were no neatly divided fields or predictable lanes of movement. Instead, there were vast forests that swallowed sound, frozen plains that offered no cover, and shattered towns reduced to skeletal ruins. Visibility could stretch for a kilometer in one direction and vanish completely in another. A man could feel safe 1 second and be dead the next without ever seeing his enemy. German columns learned quickly that every tree line was dangerous. Every window could hide a rifle. Every mound of snow could conceal a pair of watching eyes. The question followed them everywhere. Is someone watching? And more often than they liked, the answer was yes. The Red Army understood the opportunity early. Long before the war, Soviet culture placed value on marksmanship. Civilian rifle clubs existed across the country. Hunting was common in rural areas. Competitive shooting was encouraged. When the invasion came, these traditions became weapons. By late 1941, formal sniper training programs were operating behind the front lines. These were not propaganda units meant for morale posters. They were functional, systematic, and deadly. Recruits were not chosen for size or strength. They were chosen for patience, for discipline, for the ability to lie motionless for hours while insects crawled across their skin and frost crept into their bones. They learned camouflage so effective that observers could stare directly at them and see nothing. They learned how to read wind by watching smoke or falling snow. They learned to judge distance without instruments. Most importantly, they learned restraint. A sniper who fired too often died quickly. Survival depended on choosing the right moment and then disappearing again. For the sniper, staying alive mattered more than the number of kills. German soldiers began to notice changes in their own behavior. Men stopped standing upright. Helmets stayed low even when no shots were heard. Officers avoided giving orders in the open. Radios were moved under cover. Movement shifted to darkness. Entire units slowed because no one wanted to be the next silhouette against the snow. German after-action reports from the winter of 1941 described platoons pinned down for hours by a single unseen shooter, not because the sniper was firing constantly, but because the possibility of another shot controlled every decision. The sniper did not need to kill many. 2 shots could be enough. An officer, a radio operator. Suddenly, the unit had no leadership and no communication. Confusion spread. Fear followed. Men stayed in place long after the sniper had moved on. This was not battlefield chaos. This was calculated paralysis. Germany possessed skilled marksmen, but at the beginning of the campaign it lacked a true sniper doctrine. Shooting accurately was valued, but sniping as a specialized psychological weapon was not fully understood. Early German snipers operated independently without structure or support. Many were effective, but many more were killed because they lacked training in concealment and relocation. By 1942, this began to change. Germany started formal sniper schools of its own. Experienced hunters, forest rangers, and rural shooters were selected. They were taught camouflage, observation techniques, range estimation, and counter-sniper methods. But adaptation on the Eastern Front was never free. Every lesson learned came after losses. Sniping demanded a different mindset from conventional infantry combat. Infantry fought as part of a moving mass. Noise, speed, and violence surrounded them. Snipers worked alone or in pairs, separated from friendly forces, often with no immediate support. They watched men for hours. They observed routines. They learned who gave orders, who carried messages, who inspired others. Then they chose. Some snipers mentally reduced their targets to shapes and movements. Others treated the act like hunting, focusing on technique rather than emotion. Many, however, carried the psychological weight with them long after the shot. Isolation, constant vigilance, and the knowledge that a single mistake meant death took a toll. The war ended for armies in 1945, but for many snipers, it never truly ended at all. By late 1942, the silent war reached its most intense form. Stalingrad, the city was reduced to rubble. Streets no longer existed as streets. Buildings were hollow shells with jagged walls and exposed staircases. Every floor offered firing positions. Every window framed death. Snipers thrived in this environment. Soviet snipers operated independently, moving constantly, changing positions daily or even hourly. They used debris, broken walls, and collapsed ceilings to remain unseen. Some waited days for a single opportunity. German soldiers learned quickly that daylight was dangerous. Crossing a street meant sprinting and praying. Standing still was an invitation to die. Movement shifted underground. Cellars, tunnels, sewers, and shattered basements became arteries of survival. This was no longer a battle in the traditional sense. It was a contest of nerves measured in inches and seconds. Stories of legendary sniper duels spread rapidly during and after the battle. Some were true, some were exaggerated. Many were shaped by propaganda. The reality was more disturbing. There was no single duel. There were hundreds of snipers, most of them nameless, working as part of a system designed not just to kill, but to break an enemy's will. After Stalingrad, Germany transitioned into a defensive war across much of the Eastern Front. Defensive warfare favored snipers even more. Fixed positions, predictable movement corridors, and layered defenses created ideal conditions. Snipers controlled areas artillery could not reach without destroying friendly positions. They denied movement. They forced delays. They punished carelessness. By 1943, snipers were no longer seen as specialists operating on the margins. They were integrated into planning. They were doctrine. They also paid a price. Snipers often survived longer than frontline infantry, but survival did not mean peace. Many returned home withdrawn, uncomfortable in crowds, alert to sounds others ignored. Sleep came in fragments. Silence felt dangerous. They carried forests and ruins inside them. The Eastern Front is often remembered for massive tank battles, endless columns of soldiers, and overwhelming firepower. But beneath all that noise was a quieter war, a war of stillness. Men lying frozen for hours, breath controlled, muscles aching, waiting for a single moment. Because on the Eastern Front, movement invited death. History remembers victories and defeats. It remembers cities captured and armies destroyed. But wars are often decided by fear. And on the Eastern Front, fear taught soldiers the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the safest thing you could do was not move at all. If you want the next story, the women who became the deadliest snipers of the war, the brutal counter-sniper hunts, or the myths that still shape modern warfare, tell me in the comments which shadow you want to step into next. Because this war was never fought with weapons alone. It was fought with the mind,